So I've got this little scrap of rasp. It's about 3/4 of an inch wide, about 5 inches long, and I've got this little scrap of antler left from a project, I don't know what it was, so let's see what we can make out of it. So I'm going to do the tang first, so I'm just going to set it down with my guillotine tool. It's just easier doing that. You get a fairly even set both sides. I'll make that a little bit deeper, I think. That should do it. Now I've got somewhere to work to and from. As usual, I've got no plans, no drawings. We're just going to suck it and see. Just going to turn this sort of squarish to start with. I'll probably make it sort of oblong so that it doesn't spin on the handle if it ever comes loose. But we're starting off square. Ralph thinks he's heard something downstairs. What's the matter, boy? Alright, so that's roughed that out. I'm just going to start on the blade now. It's all going to just be rough because I'm going to grind sort of the final shape to it. So I'm not really worried too much about getting any finish on it with the hammer. Just trying to thin it right down a bit now because it's a bit thick. It must be, I don't know, almost 1/4 of an inch thick to start with. There's no way I want a little knife that thick. Trouble is, the thinner you get it, the quicker it cools down. Spend forever warming it up again. I've got sort of an idea in my head what shape I want, but it's going to develop under the hammer. I want to try and lose all the teeth. I don't really want the teeth marks in this one. I like the teeth marks in a lot of my rasp knives, but this one I want to try and get them out. Again, it's cooled off so quick. Going to finish off that tang a little bit more. Just going to try and straighten it, and because the antler actually bends, or is going to bend down slightly, so I don't want the tang pointing upwards. I want it either straight or slightly downhill. Let's just check it against the... Yeah, that's a bit long. So I think we'll have a little bit off at the end of that. That'll do, about 3/4 of an inch or so off of there. And that'll still draw out a little bit more before we're finished. But that's sort of roughly it. I'm going to call it a day, let it cool on the floor, and whilst that's cooling I'm going to go and try and start drilling the handle. Now I've got this, I don't know what you call it, it's like a file drill, if it'll focus, you fecking thing. There we go. It's like a drill bit with sort of a, yeah, like a file all the way up it, so you can work it sideways to sort of elongate the hole. This is actually very hard, this antler. I don't know where this one came from, but that's not drilling very well because it's binding up and getting very hot. I think what I'll do, I will go with an ordinary drill, I think. Let's see if I can find a decent one about the same size. Right, I'm just going to run this in first because that might drill better than I can file it afterwards. Yeah, that's better. But it's still very hard. Very hard. Real dense centre to this. None of that sponginess that you often find in the middle of the antlers, which is nice. Yeah, real hard. We're nearly there. Now we can go back to the filey one. Hopefully turn this slightly more oval. It's actually working quite well. You can see that's turned that quite nice and oval. I'm going to leave it like that for now because, come on focus you, although this goes in about halfway, I'm going to be messing about on the grinder with the tang, so I don't want to take it off or make the hole any or too big at the moment. So let's get on the grinder and put some shape into this blade. Dust collector. Just checking the proportions there to see that the blade's not too short or too long for the handle. The astute among you may have noticed then that the knife actually slipped down and was dragged through the gap. I didn't have the table quite close enough to the blade, to the platen. Anyway, it didn't do any damage. So before I go too much further, I'm going to just use this chisel I made I use this on the skulls and things that I make, and I'm just putting some barbs on here just along the back. I'm not going to do underneath, just on the top, just so that it's got something to grip into when I epoxy into the handle. It might be enough, but I think I'm going to run another lot down the other side. Do it that way? No, I'll have to do it the same way, otherwise they'll be going against me. There we go. Nice little row of barbs, and they're going to hopefully grip nicely into the epoxy. So let's get grinding the blade itself. I'll just put it on my little jig. I've no idea what angle I'm using on here, but this is the same angle that I used on the last knife, which worked out quite nicely, although it was a lot wider blade. I'm just going to hope that this will do the trick on this one as well. This is quite an aggressive belt, so there you go. I'm going to call it a day at that, because obviously we've got a lot of other work to do on it yet before we finish. I'm just going to quickly whop my touch mark in it. I should have actually put something under that, a bit of a wedge, because it's only caught it at the top. Now a lot of you will know that I like a satin finish on most of my blades, so I'm just running this it's like a Scotch-Brite type wheel. It's not Scotch-Brite. If you look in my description below, there'll be links to my Amazon pages where you can find these. They're Chinese, but they're about 120 grit, I think they are, or 180 grit, something like that. And they give a lovely satin finish to a lot of material. You use them on all sorts. I use them a lot for this type of job. Buy them in bulk. And they leave a nice satin finish. I'm going to leave it at that because I've got obviously the heat treating to do, which I'm going to do with the torch. I'm not going to put it in the fire. I think this will be a bit more controllable than the fire. Obviously being quite thin, it's going to get hot quite quickly, but also it's going to cool down quite quickly, so I'm going to just try and get it evenly hot. So I've got my magnet stuck to the side of my quenching pot. We're getting there. It's just coming up now, I think. It's difficult to see in this light because I'm actually outside now, so we're in sort of daylight. Yep, that's it. That's enough. Alright, let's go and clean that up, just give it a dry off and a quick rub over with my Scotch-Brite. It's just taken some of the scale off one side, you can just see there, and I'm going to use my little handheld map gas torch because this is going to get pretty hot pretty quick. There you go, it's going already. It's going much quicker than I expected. way too quick. But that'll do. Blue. I was after brown, but blue will do. Near enough for me. As you can see, as I say, it went really quick. I wanted that brown, but it's gone to blue, so hey ho. It'll do. Let's give it a clean up, and then we can sort the handle out. So I've cleaned it up on the Scotch-Brite wheel again. I'm just going to rub some acetone over it, just to make sure none of that oil from the quench is left on there. It's difficult to get it all out of these barbs. You really need to make sure it's clean, otherwise it ain't going to stick to your epoxy. Your epoxy ain't going to stick to it. Right, give that a clean out. A lid back on that acetone. That is such flammable stuff. I just want to get rid of this cloth as well, because the slightest spark sets this stuff off. Right, epoxy time. My little baggie. I use this West system. I find it pretty good for the price. I'm just going to eyeball how much I need. That'll do it. And then we'll get squidging. I like this bit. You don't want to have a too big a baggie when you're doing this, because if it spreads over too big an area, you're actually going to sort of lose it. So you want it in a quite a small baggie. You could probably even do it in a smaller one than this, but I just happen to have about 1,000 of these for sending stuff out. It's a reasonably controllable size. So squidge, squidge, squidge. And then we'll simply cut the corner off and use it like a piping bag. Can't remember where I first saw this idea about doing it in little baggies, but it's saved so much mess. It really has. I hope I've got enough. Yeah, I'm going to have plenty. In fact, I've probably got too much now. I've still got a bit left in there, but that's filled up, which I didn't expect. A few air bubbles coming up. Talking of mess, I'm just about to make some. Get a bit of cloth. Wrap that around there. I'll ease the blade in. It's not as tight as I would have liked, but this epoxy is pretty good stuff. It'll hold it. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Give it a bit of a wiggle, make sure it's all covered in epoxy and that the whole thing is filled. Right, you can see there I've left quite a lot on the blade. Now that's because it's much easier to chip off big lumps than to try and get off a tiny film when it's dry. So we'll come back tomorrow and see how it's hardened. Right, so it's all nice and dry now. Let's see if I can just scrape off the excess with my handy Boy Scouts Swiss Army knife. It's coming off a treat. It's actually been 2 days rather than a day because I had something else to do yesterday. So it's been sat here for 2 days, so it should be well dry. As you can see, it comes off quite nicely. I should probably repolish that bit anyway, just to make sure it's completely free from. Give it a bit of acetone treatment as well to make sure it's all off. Right, so I'm just going to give it a grind. I've got a really fine paper on here. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's about 240, 280 I think it is actually. So I'm just going to get the muck off this bit of antler. It's been kicking around in the workshop for quite a long while. It's covered in all sorts of stuff, grease and, you know, just general muck. So I want to get it nice and clean. There you go, it's coming up quite nice. Still needs a bit more to go, but I'm going to do that by hand. But that's got the worst of it off. So, in the knife vise. I'm going to start off with, I think this is 120. Just going to carry on with that for a little while. And then we shall progress up the grits, or down the grits, whichever way you look at it. This has been a very quick project really, although apart from the fact I've left it for 2 days, but overall actual make time is pretty quick. Alright, that's looking better. I don't know, you won't actually be able to see that. I don't think that's going to focus. Come on, focus you. No, yes, no, don't think so. Anyway, let's progress up the grits a bit. It's coming up nicely, but we really do need a little bit more just to make it a bit shinier. That's going to go for 600 now, and then up to 1500. Can't remember what this antler was, but it's nice and dense. It's not got the sort of spongy bit in the middle so much as a lot of the stuff I do use. Right, now that's about right. I'm going to cover it in tape just to protect it till I get it home and get some wax on it. Right, so I've got it wrapped up. That should keep it cleanish until I get home. Keep the muck off my hands. And we'll get it home, put an edge on it, clean her up, see what we can do. So, I've just put an edge on it with that tool that everyone says is rubbish. But it's sharp enough for me. What more could you want? You know, hey ho. So I've given it another quick rub over with some acetone, just to make sure it's completely oil free, although I'm just probably putting it all over there with my hands. And I'm going to use a toothbrush, you could use a rag, a bit of bry wax clear. I'm just going to plaster it on. some people say you can soak these in linseed oil for sort of 24 hours, just put it in a pot. I did consider it, but I was worried that the oil might loosen the bond internally on the epoxy, so I've used this wax a lot on all sorts of stuff, so I trust it. I'm going to use that. Now, once I've done the handle, I'll give the blade a quick go over, just make sure that stays a little bit protected from the elements and rust and fingerprints and stuff like that. It's amazing how steel goes rusty if you've had fingerprints on it. Right, so I'm going to leave that soak in for 20 minutes or so, and then we'll give it a buff. Right, 20 minutes has gone. I don't know if you can see. No, because it won't back in focus. Come on. There we go. Probably see that. It's quite dull. So the polish has gone nice and dry, and it's actually quite sort of not sticky, but it's gripping. I'll try and get this off without cutting myself. There you can see already that's starting to shine. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, that looks lovely. Look at that. What a treat. Yeah. Oh yeah, real nice. You can see how shiny that is. That extra bit of time with the fine paper really paid off. So, there we go. Got a nice little utility knife. I can stick it on the bench here on my desk. Just use it for anything. You know, it's cheap and easy. It didn't cost me anything, so I'm not worried if it gets broken or chipped, or you know, I can lever things off with it. Just a handy little thing I can sling on the desk. So there. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll catch you on the next one.